Supplies for the Harvest Pumpkin Trio painting. Okay, so if you have the kit, you have the paint, which is brown, aqua, orange, and white. You just need a paper plate to do some blending and mixing on. You'll have two paint brushes, a pointy one and a flat one. You'll also need a pencil for drawing the pumpkin on. You'll have a small piece of bubble wrap. You'll need to grab a paper towel and a cup to wash your brushes. The stencil is for the pumpkins here, and then we have a canvas. It's a 10 by 20 canvas. Okay, we're gonna get started painting, and before you start that, you wanna make sure that you put down something underneath your canvas. If you're laying it flat on a table, you can put it up on an easel if you want to. Okay, we're gonna take the stencil, and you're welcome to draw it freehand if you want to. I just included this in case you were nervous about doing the shape of the pumpkin. So if you're gonna do this, you can either cut it out and trace around it, or flip it over, and you're gonna do just a quick pencil line across all the black lines that are there. Just gonna rub the pencil on its side, give it some lead right behind where any of the black lines are. Okay, going all along the lines using that pencil. Again, you are welcome to just cut it out and trace around it, or you can freehand draw it on if you want to. This is just a guide to help you out so you can enjoy and relax the painting without having to concentrate on creating the specific shape of the design of the drawing. Okay, so I'm just going to do the bottom part, now I'm going to do the top. Again, I'm not doing a whole thing across the entire paper. I'm going right across where the lines are. I can see the lines through the paper. Okay. This will help you get a very light drawing when you flip it over. You're welcome to tape it down if you want to. Okay, so I'm actually going to cut across here so that my pencil lines don't overlap each other. You can do one piece at a time if you want to. Okay, so I'm going to lay mine out, and you'll see the back is going to be face down. Just like that. I'm going right in the middle of my canvas. I'm actually going to adjust it over a little tiny bit. Okay, and then what you'll do is press down gently as you go, going over the lines. And that should give you a nice light pencil drawing onto the canvas. Okay, so just like that. And you're welcome to kind of fill it in a little bit if you want to, but you should be able to see it just fine. Okay, and you'll do that with the top and the bottom piece. Okay, so I have all my light pencil lines here. I'm just going to go over them so I can see them a little bit better. Okay, so just like that. Once you have that all sketched on there, we're going to start painting. So we're going to start painting the background first. And when I do that, I'm going to use my flat brush. I'm going to dip it in a little bit of water first. And I'm going to grab some brown paint with a little bit of white if you dumped out all your paints on your plate, you just want to take it from the side so that you don't get the white mixed in with other colors. Okay, so I just mixed a little bit of white in there. I'm going to draw a line on both sides here. And I'm actually going to go around the bottom of my pumpkin. Okay, and I'm just going to fill in the whole bottom part with the brown paint. When I do that, I'm going to go horizontal brush strokes only so that it looks okay. Okay, when I paint the bottom of that in, I'm going to paint it horizontal brush strokes only so that they look like wood grain at the bottom. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit streaky and I want it like that on purpose. And I'm just filling in the bottom section with that brown. You might need another coat, but just do one first. Don't lay on a ton of paint, just a little bit. Brown with a tiny bit of white. Again, I'm just doing a horizontal brush stroke. This is going to be the little table or surface that that pumpkin is sitting on. Okay, you're welcome to go around the outside edges if you want to also. All the way around the outside edge with that brown. Okay, again, I just have horizontal brush strokes. It's a little bit streaky. I want it like that on purpose. I'm going to clean off my brush. And now we're going to do the very pale blue background. Just clean it off and dry it off well so you don't have any more of that brown paint in there. Okay, so I'm going all the way around the outside here. What I'm going to do is take a very tiny amount of that aqua color, and I'm going to take a nice big chunk of that white, and I'm going very, very, very pale around the outside. Okay, now my middle pumpkin is going to be a very light aqua also, so I'm going to really make sure that this is nice and light around the outside, even if you have to do mostly white with your very little bit of aqua color. Okay, so I'm filling all the way around that, filling that in, going completely around the pumpkin with that background color. Okay, all the way around the outside. I'd give it a little bit of an outline first, and then I'll fill everything in. The direction of this brush stroke is not super important. You really can kind of just go back and forth and fill it in. Just giving it a very pale amount of that aqua paint in the background, and it should be super pale. So remember that you're using mostly white with very little aqua in there. Okay, and you can go around your outside edges with this color as well if you'd like. Okay, so we're filling in the whole background with that very pale color. It should look almost white with just a hint of that aqua blue-green in there. And it should be a nice thin coat. You don't want to put a ton of paint on there. Okay, when you have that, you're going to clean off your brush. Tap it down to the bottom of your cup, really get all the paint out. Dry it off on your paper towel. You're going to go back in and start painting those pumpkins. I'm going to actually do the aqua one first in the middle, since this is still wet around the outside, giving it time to dry around the rest of it. Okay, so I'm going to mix a light aqua. Again, you're not going to use a ton of that aqua color, mostly white, but you do want it to be darker than it is on the outside in the background. Okay, so I'm going to take my aqua paint here. Again, I've mixed a light color, and I'm going to do that middle section of the pumpkin first, filling in just that whole piece in the middle, that one section of the pumpkin. Okay, and now I'm going to do the outside sections as well. Again, using that aqua with some white. Just getting close to the other portion that you just painted. Okay, we're gonna just add some light and dark in here in a moment to give it some shading and some shadowing and separate some of these little sections. Okay, so we're just getting those aqua pieces painted in. What I'm going to do next with that aqua on my brush is dip it in a little bit of that brown. Okay, and I'm going to give it a little bit of an outline. It should be a pretty faint color. It shouldn't be super dark brown. So you already have the aqua on there. I'm using the flat brush. You are welcome to use the skinny brush if you want to. Okay, and I'm brushing in just the edge. Just like that. Okay, going right along the edge. If you use the flat brush, you can go back in and go right back over just the edge of that line to kind of blur it a little bit so it's not so stark outline. Okay, and I'm going to do the inside piece as well. I have the aqua on my brush and I'm just dipping it into a little bit of that brown. Okay, going around each one of those sections, really kind of separating each one of them. And then again, what I'm going to do is brush back and forth, blend it a little bit. So you see how this one's a stark one? Brush back and forth a few times and you'll lighten it up a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to clean off my brush. I'm going to go back in there and highlight it in just a little bit. Okay, so cleaning off that brush, and I'm going to work on the orange section next. So I'm going to add a little bit of white to some orange to get started, just a little bit. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start to do each section. Okay, kind of like a little egg shape for the middle one. I have the slightest bit of white in there, just a little bit. And again, that's why you want the paper plate, just to blend the colors a little bit, give them a little mix. Okay, and I'm going to fill up that whole middle section with some orange paint. I'm going to go back into each one of these sections and colors to kind of highlight and shadow a little bit, but just to get started, we're going to get started with this orange. It has a tiny bit of white. Okay, and I'm going to do each section. So the bottom pumpkin has 5 sections. So I'm going to work my way across there, doing each one, kind of outlining the side first, and then filling it in. And I'm going to do 2 of those on each side. Okay, right along the side, I'm using my flat brush. If you want to do the outlining where you do this part with the skinny brush, that's fine, but just switch to the flat brush when you're ready to start painting, because you don't want 1,000 lines in the paint dragging it across. Okay, so I'm filling that whole thing in. Again, I have just a little bit of white in my orange paint, and I'm doing each one of those sections. Okay, and I'm going to do the 2 on this side as well. Okay, filling that completely in for each little pumpkin section. Okay, once you outline it, you'll be filling it in. Okay, so once you have all the sections painted in orange, again, with that orange on my paintbrush, I'm going to dip it into a little bit of brown. Okay, I'm using the flat brush. So if you have a lot of paint on your brush, you just want to kind of rub it both sides like this to make it nice and flat. Okay, and what I'm going to do is the same thing I did for the aqua one, I'm going to go right along the edge of each one of those. And again, you're welcome to switch to that tiny brush and do a little outline. But then what I want you to do is take your brush and kind of blend it in a little bit, your flat one. This way it's not just a flat outline like you did it with a Sharpie. Okay, so if you're doing your little brush, it'll look like this. That orange paint is still wet, so it should be nice. You should be able to blend it in still. Okay, so I'm just taking a little bit of brown. That's my skinny brush, right? And you can even take your skinny brush and go back across it and blend. So I'm just going across it and kind of blending some of that orange into the brown. So it kind of softens that line a little bit. Okay, just like that. Okay, doing all of my outline on my orange pumpkin. And again, I prefer to use the bigger brush, but you're welcome to use the smaller brush if you want to. Okay, giving it a little outline right at the end of the section and then blending it. Okay, so you're just going back over it again. Right along the edge of each one of those little sections, going up and around. Okay, if you feel like it didn't blend too much, you can grab some more orange paint and go right up over the edge of where your brown meets the orange. Again, we'll be coming back into this and adding more shading and shadowing once it dries a little bit more. Okay, we're going to get started with that top pumpkin now. So I'm going to clean off my brush really well, tapping it down to the bottom of my cup, getting all the paint out, and I'm going to wipe it on a paper towel here. Just make sure I don't have any more color in there because we're going to do that light colored pumpkin on top. All right, so when I do this light colored pumpkin, I'm going to dip a tiny, tiny bit of brown and mix it with some white. Just kind of make it a little bit off-white. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing. Middle section first, and then 2 outer sections. Little outline first, and then I fill it in. Again, using that flat brush. That skinny one really is just for detail. Okay, filling that whole pumpkin in. Again, it's just kind of like a beigey off-white. I'm going to clean off that brush. I'm actually going to use the small one just for this one since it's a little area to work in. Cleaning it off, drying it off. I'm going to dip it in some white first and then a little bit of brown. This way it softens it a little bit. And what I'm going to do is outline these sections as well. Same way I did with the other one. Remember, I don't want it really super dark brown, okay? So I have it white first and then a little bit of brown on my brush. And I'm just going to give these little sections a quick outline all the way around the bottom round part, up through the section. Same thing right here, going along the outside of that pumpkin, outlining just like this. Okay, if at any point it looks too dark, just grab a little white, go right over what you've painted with that brown, and it'll soften it up a little bit. Okay, so I have my little sections right here. Just like that. I'm gonna blend them just a little bit more, so I'm gonna clean my brush off. And I'm just gonna brush back and forth right over where those little brown lines are, just to kind of soften them a little bit so it's not such an outline and it's more of a shadow at the edge of it. Okay, once you have that done, I'm just gonna add a little more in here. There we go. Okay, Okay, once you have that done, we're going to paint that top stem brown and a little white on your little brush. And I'm going to just fill that stem in, just like that. Adding a little more straight brown to the left side of it. Just the one side, doesn't matter if it's left or right. Making a little shadow. While I still have my skinny brush, I'm going to go ahead and add a little vine coming off of it. So I'm going to go from the base of it, and I'm just going to swirl it across, just like that. Okay, you can fill it in a little bit if it got light. I added that vine in. I'm going to go ahead and add in the highlights on my pumpkin, starting with the aqua one. Since that's the first one we painted, that'll be the driest. So I'm going to go with a very, very pale aqua blue, which means I'm going to grab a chunk of white, just the tiniest bit of aqua in it. Okay, you do want it aqua, you don't want it completely white. And I'm going to paint along the edge of that middle section. I'll do a little bit on the other side, just kind of adding in some highlights. I'm going to do that to each one of those sections. Just pick one little spot, kind of paint a little rounded part with that pale white and aqua combination. Okay, it's just adding a little highlight to my pumpkin. Okay, adding it right on the side there. I'm going to clean off my brush. I'm going to work on doing the orange one. When I do that, same thing. I'm going to mix a little bit of orange into some white. I want it to be super pale. And I'm going to go in on each section towards the edge with that very pale orange and just brush with my flat brush a little bit of that light orange, and it's just going to kind of highlight each section. What it'll start to do is make it look like a little bit more three-dimensional, like it's a little bit more rounded. Okay, and I'm doing that on the outer edge of each side of that pumpkin slice there, each little section. Okay, adding just a little bit of that in, giving it a little bit of highlight. Okay, cleaning off my brush. Before I go into highlighting and shadowing that top one, since it's still pretty wet, I'm going to go in here and add a little bit of shadowing with the dark straight color of each one of those. So I'm going to go back to the aqua, and I'm going to use a darker shade of aqua than I have on there. And I'm going to do just a few little aqua right at the line where that brown line is. I'm just going to brush it in a little bit, and what you can do is take the tiny brush and do this too. So I'm just adding a little bit more of that color into it where I had the brown shaded kind of sectioned off line, and I took a little bit more of that straight aqua and just kind of put it right at the edges there. And you can always blend it back and forth if you feel like you have a little bit too much. My aqua one is done. I'm going to go in to my orange pumpkin, cleaning off my brush, drying it off really well. I'm going to go into some straight orange, and I'm just going to add a few streaks next to that highlight, so you can go towards the middle, just right next to it. Okay, and what I'm doing is, you see, I'm doing short brush strokes, just kind of brushing a little bit more color in there, adding a little bit more straight orange here and there, just to kind of add a little depth. You can certainly do a little bit more at the bottom, make it feel a little bit more rounded at the bottom. Okay, so just a little bit. When you're done with that, you're going to clean off your brush. While you're still using that flat brush, I'm going to go in and do a little bit more shading in my top beige pumpkin. So I'm going to take some straight white, And I'm going to add a little bit of straight white here and there in the sections towards the edge like we did with the other ones. Okay, once you get that in there, I clean off my brush a little bit, and I'm going to go in with a little bit of a darker beige. So I'm mixing some white and brown together. And I'm just going to do a few little spots on the pumpkin that have a little of that darker color. Right, I'm just brushing it in the curved shape of the pumpkin. Just like that, adding a little bit of depth to it. Okay, so that's the idea when you're adding the color in back into it. And you can always go back into any of them, kind of add a little bit more of that color. I'm just going to lighten that up a little bit, but I feel like I didn't get a whole lot of that aqua in here, so I'm just going to add a little bit more. All right, once you get enough color in there, the last thing we're going to do is to add a nice technique on the edge using the bubble wrap. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take my piece of bubble wrap. I'm going to load up my medium brush with some white and some brown. Okay, so I'm going to do a little brown here and there. I don't really want straight brown. I don't want it to be super dark, but I'm going to take some white, go across, and I'm just kind of loading on some paint, holding my bubble wrap in place. And then I'm going to take a little brown on my brush and do some of those. And I'm just kind of going over some of the parts where I did white, so it'll be a lighter brown. And I'm not doing all of them. I want some of them to be straight white, some of them brown. I'll go back into some white, finish off the bottom section here. You can even grab a little bit of that aqua if you want to mix some of that in. Okay, so I'm going to take that, and what I'm going to do is right up around the edges, start to put in some of that bubble. So I'm just going to use part of it, tap it down, gives me that little edge. I'm going to turn it a little bit so it's not just a straight line around the edge. And I'm going to keep going, just tapping it down around the outside edge, peeling it up, and going up around the top corners. Okay, you really should only have to load it on there once with paint, but if you decide that it's not getting enough on there, you can load a little bit more on there. I just want it to be faint right at the edges. All right, and that's it. That is your Harvest Pumpkin Trio painting with a little extra edging in there. Thanks so much for painting with me today.